Welcome back, dear viewers, and in this segment of our program we are going to talk about the Egyptian Cypriot Greek Summit, which is expected to take place here in Cairo, and we are going to shed more light on the importance of this summit, which is expected to tackle illegal migration and terrorism, as well as threats facing the region. And to shed more light on this issue, I am joined today by Dr. Yusef Mazhar, member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Yusef. Always a pleasure to have you, sir, with us. It is the seventh tripartite meeting between His Excellency President Sisi, the Greek Prime Minister, and the Cypriot President. Sir, how do you see the significance of such a meeting at this particular timing? With all what's going on in the region, we can assume, or we can say that the Middle East region is quite turbulent at the moment. So how do you see the significance of such a meeting between the three leaders?
Well, first of all, I think both sides, or all of the three sides, and also in the various countries, are very happy that this is going on, because after all we are neighbors, and we have been neighbors traditionally for generations. And if we touch upon the relationship between Egypt and Greece and also Cyprus, along as we talk, we'll insert one or two historical facts, but it's only normal, and it's very good that this grouping is talking to each other. Now, when you ask this question, your questions are always very deep, I know, so I have to expand on them. We can talk about the main interest at the moment now, which are the deposits of gas and oil. That's number one. Also, the exports or the use of this gas, all these finds. We can talk about the new excavations and the interests of other countries in the same area. We can talk about tourism. We can talk about also the trade relationships. There's a lot to talk about, because don't forget that a flight to Athens from here is just over an hour.
Like an internal flight.
Yes, it's like an internal flight. Yes. And don't forget that Egypt has a very rich and comprehensive Greek community in Alexandria especially, and many of the prominent Greek historians in modern times even, Alexandria and Cairo are well known. There are also a lot of Greek investments in Egypt. The different kinds of industries have been supported by Greek industry. So we've got a lot to talk about. So you pick and choose. Where shall we start?
So we can start from historical relations that bind Egypt with Greece and Cyprus.
Yes. Well, of course, I love to talk 5,000 years back.
Yes.
Something that people don't know, that there used to be a trade between Egypt, Pharaonic Egypt, and what is now Lebanon, and also what is now Cyprus. And the fleets of the Egyptian pharaohs, or the Egyptian kings or rulers, had great interest in going to this area. First of all of the timber and the wood which was found in let's say what is now Lebanon, just across, and also lots of minerals that were in Cyprus. So there are deposits of certain minerals that the ancient Egyptians used, which found their origins in that place. So there was a lot of movement in this direction. That's more Cyprus. Now, of course, if you go to the area of Greece, don't forget that Alexander the Great is not Greece exactly, but Macedonia, which is very close or stuck to it. And Alexander the Great has got a big history here. He went up to Siwa. He created the city of Alexandria. Even after that, when the Ptolemies came into the reigning monarchy of Egypt, also you come to our Queen Cleopatra, and you know the stories of her relationships with that part of the world. So we have got a lot of connections. This is, of course, because you mentioned the historical, so it's very deeply rooted, and even many of our monuments in Egypt have got depictions of Alexander the Great in his role as a ruler or as a pharaoh in Egypt itself. But I think more important is what is happening now, or what are the interests at the moment.
Yes. Sir, of course, the economic cooperation is dating back since the time of the ancient Egyptians and, of course, the ancient Greeks and the Cypriots. How can we increase the cooperation among the three countries in the field of energy in particular?
Well, energy, of course, so when you talk
Since
about energy.
Already great
Oh,
cooperation.
yes, yes. Now, if you to break down energy, you can break it down into many things. It can be gas, it can be oil, and it can be also electricity. It can also, we know that, I start with the smaller or the latter part. Egypt is now...
If I can add renewable energy.
Yes, of course, of course, yes. Well, you seem to be an energy critic, so I'll try and answer that. If you look at the different phases of this energy, you'll find that the recent finds that were in this area is mostly gas. Let's see, it's prominent gas. Now, don't forget that this is something that is changing. I mean, we talked about history, but nobody talked about gas at that time. But the technology is advancing all the time. Areas which were, let's say, looked at or dug at a certain phase did not show anything. But as the geography changed and as the international regulations of where Egypt extends to, Egypt does not extend to the shoreline now. There are many new regulations, United Nations, etc., where it extends underwater. So that means that Egypt has got a claim to many of the things that are very close to this area. But this area, of course, there is Greece, there is Egypt, there is Cyprus, and there's also Turkey. One part of Cyprus, the latter part of Cyprus, less known and less in the news. So all this makes a very difficult potpourri of relations. So this is something we can, of course, talk about.
Yes, indeed.
So, sir, how do you see cooperation between the three countries in the field of illegal migration?
All right. Let us say one thing. If you look at the illegal migrants, and we look at not what is coming from Europe to Europe, this is not our business, but what's coming out of Africa.
Yes.
A lot of the migration from Africa goes from the south to the north, because these are the conditions where there are problems. There's not a very high standard of living. So people are moving from Mali, they're moving from the Saharan area. But luckily for us, they move upwards towards either Morocco or Libya. Until now, more towards the west. Egypt has not had any serious migratory problems through Egypt itself. So it is not one of the burning problems, but Egyptian authorities and President Sisi is always very wary that the tide of immigrants does not turn towards Egypt. Of course, a bit from by way of the Sudan, etc., but Egypt has got a wonderful way of absorbing a lot of people, and they have found their way in the Egyptian society.
Doctor, allow me to add here, Egypt maybe is not only concerned of the issue of illegal migration as a country, but as Egypt is heading the African Union and His Excellency President Sisi is sharing this round, we are keen to solve this problem, as Africa is having a great problem concerning this issue of illegal migrants. So how can we be tackling this issue with the leaders of Greece and Cyprus during the talks?
Well, you see, of course, Europe is not very happy with the advent of all these immigrants. And one of the very important theories about that is to create jobs and better living conditions in the countries that are now losing their citizens towards other countries.
Of course.
So this brings us to the fact that how can this be improved? One of the things is the advent or the finding of gas in this area, and the gas fields, and you have the names of two of the most famous Zohr, and there's a new one at the moment. So Egypt is looking at using this gas and liquefying it. That's very important to liquefy, because gas, you can't use gas in everything. You have to, so even buses and automobiles, they go now on LNG and CNG. So these are all wonderful opportunities to provide more jobs and more extending the economy. And this will stop people from thinking of going to finding a better life in the north.
Indeed.
So, sir, also, how do you see the timing of this summit in light of latest developments in Eastern Mediterranean region?
Well, the summit is a very good thing, and the best thing about it, it is regular. I mean, summits that only meet when there are problems is not the ideal thing. But now it's more or less we're getting used to that, and our president is very sharp on keeping things, and you see everything that he does is timed and repeated at intervals, so it becomes very important, because there are things that change. They change in minutes, you see. So there are the first item that comes out of this. Well, we have gas. Part of it is going to Egypt, part of it is going to the explorer itself, who is an Italian company, so they also take part of the share. And part of it also, if you are in the area of Cyprus, one side of Cyprus, the other side of Cyprus, then also they become a partner in all this. So projects which are very enlightening and coming up is, can we move this movement of more gas towards exports in the direction of Europe? And of course your best partner is Cyprus and Greece, because across the Mediterranean, that's the first stop. And if you're going to have a pipeline that's going to feed anywhere into Europe or to Greece itself, the first stop is in either one of these countries, or mostly, let's say, in Greece. So a lot of the new projects will have to be, and are actually, joint projects in this area.
Yes. Doctor, of course, both Greece and Cyprus are members of the EU. So how the increase of economic cooperation and the trade between Egypt and both Greece and Cyprus could give the way for Egypt for better economic and trade ties with the EU?
Well, you know, the EU is a very big membership of many, many countries.
Indeed.
And the more voices you have of support or of direct interest, the better for you. Because it is, the EU works. It's true there are 2 or 3 countries who are the leaders because of the economic society. But another voice or another 2 voices is very useful for Egypt.
Indeed.
And this is being happening for other things, but it happens also in this case here. But let me say something. Maybe I'd like to add, I think this program is very interesting because you're asking interesting questions, and it brings us to thinking of ahead. The way I see it is that, don't forget, Greece has got one of the most significant tanker fleets.
Yes.
And you know the names, Onassis and Ephesus and all those. And these, even though they are not governmental, but the biggest the biggest tanker fleet in the Mediterranean, actually outside the Mediterranean, is there. So I think that when we get over the excitement of or regulate everything with gas and oil, I think we should be looking at the tanker fleets, because you don't have to have a tanker fleet yourself. You can couple or have an agreement. And don't forget, tankers mean Suez Canal. So if you are part of this tanker fleet or as an agreement, and you're going to export through them or import through them, and they pass through the Suez Canal, so you've got another very interesting area. It can be the payment of the dues through the canal. In the future, it can be also maintenance or let's say the sucking up of these vessels as they go through. So I think this can be a very and the third area is Greek industry. There are many examples of very successful Greek industries in Egypt. In the area of batteries, there was in the area of tissue papers.
Yeah.
And I had the pleasure of being in one of the large tissue paper manufacturers who come out of this area. So, and don't forget, Greeks are very shrewd manipulators of business.
We can say here that the Egyptians and Greek do have a lot in common.
Yes.
Actually.
Yes, it's true. And you know, one of the very good things that the present era has opened up, and our president has done, is to bring back many of the Greeks who left Egypt at the time when...
And there was a conference actually back to the roots in Alexandria, which was held, of course, under the auspices of President Sisi, concerning the return to the roots here, and the Greek and Cypriots and the communities.
Well, this is exactly what I'm insinuating. You put the nail on the head. This is exactly it. And if you had followed this event, you'd have seen the pleasure of many of these who had left Alexandria at a certain time, which was not very favorable, to be able to come back, even if they did not open their businesses again, but to visit, and they've got their relatives here, and it will be very beneficial, very beneficial. I think it's very important. And don't forget that if you talked about the EU. Now, the EU extends from the north to the south.
Of course.
But the temperament of the people and the customs of the people to the south are very similar to us. In the south, it's all the Mediterranean aspect, and both of us are on the Mediterranean.
Yes, of course.
So, sir, how do you see cooperation between the three countries in the field of tourism, as we can see that many Egyptians now go spend the summer in Greece, as well as many Greeks come to Egypt. So how do you see cooperation in this field?
Well, the easiest answer to this, of course, is that Egypt or Egyptians have found they don't necessarily have to go to Switzerland or to go to Austria or to go to all these resorts. Of course, this is further away and probably more expensive. But now you see them going more to the Greek islands, to Cyprus.
Of course, to spend
and that's the first phase, and I love to sort of categorize things. That's the first natural phase. What's the second one? That Egyptian entrepreneurs, our businessmen, have been very sharp. Seeing this trend, they have opened up hotels and areas in Greece, and in Cyprus. So if you don't want to go to Hurghada, you don't want to go to Guna, you can go to the same Egyptian investment in Cyprus. And it's very, and I know we shouldn't be talking about exact names here, but it exists. And it's well known, so that's a very good...
Sir, I'll take it from here, and of course, as we are doing the new El Alamein city, of course, a great summer, all seasons, of course, but it would be a great place for tourists to come to spend the summer. So how can we promote for the Greeks and the Cypriots, since they are quite close here, and the flight here to Alexandria would be a very short trip? So how can we promote for El Alamein, for the Greeks and the Cypriots in particular?
Look, if you look at tourism, number one is price, number two is ease of access, regularity of access, and the type of service they will get when they go to a new country. One thing that has happened, which is quite interesting, we have two relatively new airports. We have got an airport now on the north coast where you can take a flight from the north coast very close to El Alamein, and you can fly with maybe half an hour or 1 hour less to any of these areas with trips which were pretty regular.
Yeah.
And many of my colleagues, spending the summer in Alamein or in the North Coast, they go and spend 10 days in Cyprus or in Greece or even in Italy by taking a flight next to the summer resort. You see, there's another airport which is called Sphinx.
Yes.
And this is in the outskirts of Cairo.
Yes.
This is also for, let's say, the west side of Cairo. It's very useful. It takes 1 hour away to this place. So this is the first thing. Secondly, it's the more tourist companies should be working towards this, making it cheaper, making it easier to go. And the last thing is my message to many of my Greek friends who work in and responsible people. You have to make things easier. Schengen to Greece or to Cyprus, if it exists, has to be easier. And at the moment, the bureaucracy is a bit tough for different reasons. But if you want to make this, people should not spend lots of time walking around embassies trying to get visas.
So, sir, how do you see cooperation between the three countries in the field of energy, and how can they face threats in the Mediterranean?
How can
they face threats in the Mediterranean?
Well, you
threats
see,
by other countries, of course.
Yes. Look, first of all, we talked about everything like gas. Natural gas comes out of a drilling unit. But you can take what is good in this cooperation is that this gas, which is gas, you can circulate it and you'll get more villages and more towns in Egypt using gas, more industries using natural gas. But you can also liquefy it.
Yes.
Liquefy it means what? It will go, it can be bottled to places where you can't reach economically with pipelines. But most important, I think we also talked this in a previous program with you, is that we're trying to turn all our fleets of vehicles, buses, cars, to run on gas, natural gas or compressed natural gas. We're trying to have this, and there is a project in Alexandria, there's a project now to get rid of the tuk-tuk, outside the main cities, and bring in other kinds of vehicles, but the important thing, running on compressed natural gas.
Of course, it will be cheaper.
It will be cheaper, it will be cleaner. Don't forget, there's one aspect which is worrying the whole world, and all this disruption in the cities you see on TV, they are worried. Young people are very worried now about the quality of the air, quality of things. And some of these yellow shirts, they're talking only about the environment.
Indeed.
And young people, they're not political anymore. I mean, we must analyze what we are saying. Young people are not all political. They don't go, they are saying we want a good life. We want to have children who will grow up in a clean environment. So using gas as a fuel in the public transportation or the private transportation is very, very useful. And there is a pilot project in Alexandria now for natural gas buses. Very beautiful. And there's also a new line here in Cairo which is doing the same thing. And I worked for a project with the United States at one time called Cairo Air, to clean Cairo Air by having buses not running on diesel, which is rather a messy exhaust, in gas. So you see how all things are interlocked.
Yes. Doctor, one of the main topics that is expected to be discussed today in the summit is the issue of combating terrorism and security in the region. From your point of view, how can the three countries cooperate in order to face terrorism?
Well, you know, there are people are more professional than I am, but the logical things are the more you get together and the more you single out problems and try and solve them, the better you are. Now, you can solve them. Terrorism now is not only on land. It is not only against the police. It is everywhere. And if you take terrorism on the open seas, just to start with, having we have now an Egyptian fleet in the Mediterranean, another one in the Red Sea. This fleet is very up to date. It has been assisted by our relationship with France. There are many units there that are very, very advanced. And you can see already that there are attempts now to make sure there is no problem along the Red Sea route, which means that anything coming out of the Suez Canal can reach its destination, or anybody comes into the Suez Canal will not suffer. So Egypt's taking part of the safety and let's say all the efforts against terrorism, naval terrorism in the Red Sea. On the Mediterranean, until now it is more a question of immigrants, etc., but it can develop into anything else. So I think we are on the right track, and thanks heaven we looked ahead and managed to boost our naval forces. So they are part now, an important part of the combinations of having naval units guarantee against, at the beginning it was smugglers, but now it's terrorism. And if you go back to the news, you find that out of, not to mention countries, but in the area of Somalia, in the Horn of Africa, people go out terrorism with very simple boats and with some very simple arms, and they get on top of a tanker and they deviate the tanker, or they ask for sums of money. So you can fight this simply by cooperation between the two, or between the three countries, plus the other countries along. Of course, you've got along the Red Sea, you've got the other Arab countries, etc. So the more you become part of the let's say anti-terrorism system of this area, the more you will be able to control it. And I think even the very big Western powers, I don't think they are ready to, you know, they have sent things into the Red Sea and they're looking at the flotilla, etc. But the policy of the major powers now is let's say subcontract the problems of the world to countries who live in this area.
So, sir, if we talk about regional threats as the situation in Libya and Syria and all threats around here in the Middle East, why it is important for Egypt, Cyprus and Greece to adopt the same stance?
The same?
Stance.
Well, you see, the problem with the day today is the different players in everything.
Yes.
Now, before it would be a problem between Persia and Macedonia, so it is bilateral. Now, you have the direct problem, you have proxy problems that each part of the split in one country resorts to another, let's say, superpower who backs them, and this is backed the other one. So the players everywhere now are not the people themselves, it is their neighbors. So if you have a problem in Libya, Libya's neighbors, Egypt for example, have an interest that everything is okay. But now the giant powers, or the major powers, are also involved, and they also take sides. So you get a very complex system of antagonism and probably unnecessary friction because of the and don't forget that some of the policies of the major powers, and if you follow what's happening in the United States with the present president now, it's rather volatile. It is there are times when a president is very volatile, I call it that way, or very quick to react. Others react according to the system of foreign affairs. So with these abrupt changes, it ripples down to everywhere. So I think you have the political problems there are considerable, but I think to summarize really what we're talking about, that it's very good that there is a regional cooperation, at least in this area. There are other countries around. Some of them are very favorably adjusted.
Yes.
Because they're in the Arab world, for example. Others are a bit worrying at the moment. But I think if people calm down a little bit, everybody can benefit, because it's the Mediterranean now is really got immense possibilities.
Yes, indeed.
Immense possibilities.
Dr. Yusef Mazhar, member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. Always a pleasure to have you with us, sir. Thank you very much.
Same here. And thanks for the questions, and thanks for the very interesting discussion.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mazhar. And now, dear viewers, short break, and we'll be back, so stay tuned.